So I've been asked the old chestnut of, do I feel guilty for my ethnicity? This is often a question and trope that conservatives level at leftists, that somehow we're all feeling guilty about the crimes and history of our ancestors. And I think the word ethnicity is interesting. Often this is conflated by conservatives to muddy the water and to make it seem that they're not racist. So, do I feel guilt for my race, my ethnicity? Well, the simple answer is no. I don't feel guilt for the actions of other people, be it my ancestors, my neighbours, or anybody who is associated with my ethnicity or race. It's really that simple. So, what is going on with this question? Well, often with a lot of conservative talking points, they're buried in emotion, and often the emotion of psychological projection, which is it's a defence mechanism, essentially. So a conservative will have uncomfortable feelings about race and racism. They'll deny it exists. They'll kind of be upset that leftists are addressing the balance of racism and see that as racist itself. Like, don't call out racism, you're the true racist. And it's a very emotional and very whiny response to addressing injustices and crimes. And they have to come up with these questions. They have to be like, well, you must feel guilty for the crimes you haven't committed. And it's just like, okay, this doesn't make sense. We don't do this with other questions. We don't go, well, certain groups do, but if your neighbour was to commit a crime and I was to be interviewed on the news, I wouldn't be asked to feel guilt for the crime of my neighbour. We don't do this. This isn't a normal thing to do. So what's going on here? Well, I think there's two levels of psychological projection. A lot of conservative talking points are often just them projecting their emotions onto leftists. And I think this happens in two ways. So first of all, you've got the idea that I think they might feel some guilt on some level about the actions of their ancestors. Often conservatives and their ancestors are the ones who colonised and brutalised and killed people in Africa and India and across the world. So I think on some level, again, this is not conscious, they're not aware of this. Often introspection is discouraged by conservatives because once you start asking questions about, feelings, certain feelings, you could be homosexual and that will not do. So you kind of don't think too much, essentially, or don't feel or introspect. So you have to project out. And conservatives, they do this constantly. So on that level, they're projecting their guilt or potential guilt about the actions of their ancestors. And then the second one, which is more pernicious, is that I think a lot of conservatives see race as a zero-sum game. And they assume that, and this happens with Muslims, so if a Muslim commits a terrorist act, often that community will be asked to atone for the sins of the individual. So they'll be expected to apologise, and that whole community will just be associated with the crimes of an individual. And I think that's what they're projecting there. It's a zero-sum game, like, oh, if a white person then has committed all these crimes, or a selection of white people, I have to feel guilty for those crimes. And it's just simply not how it works. Why should I feel guilty for the crimes of another, my ancestors, of my neighbour, whoever it is, no matter the colour of their skin? Why would I feel guilty for that? It's a very strange question. So you've got those two levels of psychological projection. The idea that they potentially are projecting their guilt onto me, and then the idea that racists should feel culpable for the actions of someone of the same colour or ethnicity or religion or faith or whatever. How is this productive? And how does this really move anything on? Well, it doesn't really. It's just an emotional non-argument. It's a psychological projection. It's assuming that white people or people trying to address the social injustices of the past are somehow, we're riddled with guilt. No, we want practical solutions. We want to move forward. We want to not just, although there's emotion that ties into it and feelings of compassion and empathy, I think we need to be driven by that, not just guilt and, weren't our ancestors so evil? Yeah, maybe they were. But how does that move us forward? And I think questions like this are just why conservatives just don't really ask the right questions. They just frame things as, look, it's an emotional response. It's an emotional question that doesn't really have any utility. It doesn't help the situation. So why should people feel guilty about the actions of another? That's my question. Should you feel guilty for the actions of your white neighbour if you're white? I don't think so, but I'd be interested to know in the comments. So I'll see you in the next video.